Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network Groong. In this episode of Conversations on Groong, 𝐀𝐬𝐿 𝐀𝐬𝐿 discusses the coverage of the war in Artsakh in Arab media with representatives of the Armenian Diaspora in the Middle East. How is the current war treated in Arab press? How does this treatment differ from country to country? And more importantly, how do we improve the quality of the coverage about Armenia for Arabic audiences in general? If these topics interest you, then we think you'll like this episode. Our guests today are 𝐀𝐬𝐿, who has been teaching at the American University of Beirut since 1988. She has published 2 books which compile newspaper articles and reports from the genocide years, published by the Canadian and British press. 𝐀𝐬𝐿 has been compiling news for the Armenian News Network, Groong, since 1999. And Vera Yakubian, who is the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of the Middle East. She is a PhD candidate in political science and a lecturer at the American University of Beirut in politics. Vera also teaches courses on the Armenian genocide at 𝐻𝐻 University. First, however, a request. If you like what you hear, please help us reach a wider audience by subscribing to our channel, liking, and sharing our podcasts on your social media channels. We are available on most major platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, and more. Thanks in advance.
Hello and welcome everyone to Groong Podcast. The Armenian communities living in the Middle East in general, and in Arab countries in specific, have a long history of advocacy and building bridges between their 2 homelands, their country of residence and Armenia. Since the outbreak of the war in Nagorno-Karabakh in late September, the Arab media and policymakers have been covering and commenting about this war. Today, we're going to try to have a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities that the Armenian communities and advocacy groups have been facing in trying to get the Arab public and policymakers to be correctly informed about the war and ways to counter Turkish propaganda in the Middle East. Hello and welcome, 𝐀𝐬𝐿 and Vera. I would like to start talking about the Karabakh war, I would like to just quickly ask you, how are you doing? Both of you are in Lebanon currently, and about 2.5 months ago, there was a huge explosion in Beirut, in the Beirut harbor. Our focus was on that until the outbreak of the war in Nagorno-Karabakh in Artsakh. Can you just give us a brief overview about how the community is doing these days?
I'll give a brief first explanation of what happened on August 4. So it was on the afternoon of 4 August, 2 explosions occurred at the port of Beirut. The extremely powerful second blast actually resulted in at least 220 deaths, maybe more, 7,000 injuries, and an estimated 300,000 people were left homeless. The explosion was linked to about 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate and was felt in Turkey, Syria, Palestine, and Cyprus, and was regarded as having been among the most powerful non-nuclear explosions in history. So the Lebanese government declared a 2-week state of emergency in response to the disaster. In the aftermath of the blast, protests erupted across Lebanon against the Lebanese government for their failure to prevent the explosions, joining a large series of protests that have been already taking place in the country since October 2019. The Lebanese cabinet resigned because of, or as a result of the explosion, and due to the mounting political pressure that was intensified, of course, by the explosions. The port of Beirut was Lebanon's, as you know, main artery for incoming material to the country, which included urgent supplies and grains, which have to be immediately replaced. So many businesses were destroyed in the shockwave from the explosion, adding to, of course, already high rates of unemployment and poverty in the country. As a result, there was, as you know, a widespread destruction. Much of Beirut downtown and surrounding areas were tormented with damaged houses, scattered glasses, damaged shops and cars and hospitals. The heavily Armenian populated areas of Ashrafiyeh, Marm Khail, Khalil Badawi, and Noor Hajan were scenes of, let's say, widespread destruction. These 4 Armenian districts suffered heavy damage, with some buildings having all their windows shattered and other buildings being completely destroyed. Burj Hamud also suffered damages. Many houses were totally or partially damaged. Also shops, many community centers and churches. The number of Armenian dead had been estimated at 13 more or less, with at least 250 injuries. The Armenian Catholic-State of Cilicia also was badly damaged. What else? As I said, in Buchamut, the 𝐀𝐬𝐤𝐚𝐬𝐧 Center in Buchamut, which houses the editorial office of Artsakh daily newspaper and Vanatine radio station, the Hamaskaim publishing house, and where my office is found, was damaged. Thanks God there were no injuries and casualties. And I'm sure you've heard that the Armenian government was mobilized to provide emergency humanitarian assistance to Lebanon less than a day after the massive explosion. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan held a telephone conversation with the Lebanese President Michel Aoun I think it was next day or the day after, to offer condolences to the families of the victims and discuss the scope of the assistance. President Ahmed Sarkisian had also been in contact with the Catholicos, Aram I, in order to assess the situation and determine how to provide assistance to the country's substantial and influential Armenian community. Even Artsakh's president, Arayik Harutyunyan, also spoke with Aram I and said Artsakh is ready to receive 150 Lebanese Armenian families. Imagine.
So Vera, sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you, but 2 months later, what is the situation now? What is it? How is the community, or how is the overall political? We know that there are new attempts for forming government, but within
Yeah.
that context, what is the focal point of the country these days? Is it still the COVID-19 cases increasing,
We
or
have both. We have the COVID pandemic. It's increasing. The numbers are increasing, unfortunately. I hope it's not becoming out of control, but it is increasing compared to the previous months. We have the issue of forming a cabinet. It's still in, let's say, still working on forming a new cabinet. You know, we have the new Prime Minister, Saad Hariri, was nominated, and he is in the procedure of forming a new cabinet. Still, the negotiations, or let's say discussions, are going on to form a government of, or a cabinet of 20, let's say, ministers. The community, if you, as you know, the community was, after the explosion and before that, was in a very hard economic and social situation. The blast came to increase this situation, to harden it actually. But after with the start of the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, I can tell you, maybe Katya can also emphasize this, what I'm saying, that the Armenian community forgot all about its economic and social problems, and we are now thinking about only Nagorno-Karabakh, how to, or following the news every day. Nobody is calling our, let's say, community centers asking for financial help or money. They are just asking how can we assist our sisters and brothers in Karabakh. And I'm sure you've heard that in the last weeks we collected, and it was not pretty much money, but what I mean, we collected approximately 194 million Lebanese pounds, which makes approximately now $27,000 and 14 and a half or $14,500,000 to donate to Karabakh conflict.
I want to shift the conversation now and talk a bit about the situation in the Middle East, at least when it comes to the reactions to the war. Understanding that it's multi-nuanced when we say the Middle East, it's not just about Lebanon. You were talking about the situation in Syria, in Iraq, in other places, Arab and non-Arab countries as well. And obviously, each one of these countries have their own domestic issues and wars and civil war and pandemic. Now, the question would be, in this context, what has been the Arab media, the Arab press reacting, or how if you can, maybe Katya, because you do contribute a lot to Groong news and probably also follow the news very intimately. What is the overall sort of reaction of the Arab press when it comes to the war, the ongoing war? Has there been a change in the last month or so from how they were covering it and how is it being covered now?
Change in covering, I don't know, but I've been doing intensively looking into the Arab media and their reports on Armenians or anything about the Armenia or Armenian issues. And I've been impressed, like on a daily basis, I would find 10, 15 different articles published in different media. And I'm talking about pan-Arab. I'm not talking about just the Lebanese one. Actually, I'm a bit disappointed by the Lebanese media. The impressive ones were coming from Egypt. Most of their reports and their articles and their TV, YouTube, whatever were shared by the Emirati and the Saudi papers or media outlets. They've been doing an excellent job. Of course, it's not 100%. You do see a little bit of anti-Armenian propaganda also in the Arabic language, but they've been covering the war quite extensively.
Katya, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I want to
Yes.
ask you here, when you mentioned specifically, you said Egypt, for instance, and Emirati and Saudi. Is it a factor
Yes.
of the scope of the media there in terms of the media or the press itself having the capabilities to be able to allocate resources to cover this issue, or is it another factor in your opinion?
It's most of them are actually translating. I don't think they have people on the ground to report about the war. So what's happening is that maybe they take something from the Associated Press and Reuters and AFP, the Agence France Presse, and putting together their own versions. I doubt they have people there. Sometimes the Lebanese had sent a few reporters. I know a couple of the TV media were there the first week, and then they came back. I don't think they have any more people on the ground. Perhaps Vera knows better because she works closely with the Armenian community here. But as I said, Egypt has been doing an excellent job.
How about Syria, Katya?
Problem is that the Azeris and Turks have a lot of media outlets published in the Arabic language. And they are disseminating their propaganda, their version of history, their version of the war a lot. We don't have that privilege with the Armenians. So we're depending on our Arab neighbors, our Arab friends, and
Right.
the media here.
But is there a vacuum? Well, you mentioned Egypt. There's obviously the politics involved, right? You know, if they're predisposed towards Turkey or against Turkey.
Exactly, and that's been helping a little bit. Yes.
Have the Armenian sort of attempts or the pro-Armenian articles or analysis has it been counter sort of weighed by any Turkish or Azerbaijani sort of press within the Arab press coverage?
You rarely see. That's the problem. Someone gives his opinion and it stops there. There's no give and take. Well, I've been doing this thing since 2015, the Arabic language. I've been doing Groong for 21 years, but the Arabic language, I've been doing it since the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. And it's quite amazing that the Armenians are a bit weak in the Arab media, while the Turkish and Azeri propaganda machines are working 24/7.
Right.
They have, other than having their multiple Arabic language media, which we don't, theirs come up in Google search, Google News search, while the Armenian ones don't show up. I know that Armenian Press has their Arabic version, Artsakh has its Arabic version, but they never come up in Google search, the regular Google News search. Whenever there is a commemoration, for example, the events, you see Azeri diplomats publishing their columns in the countries that they are working. No refutation, no counter, nothing to counter from the Armenian diplomats, nothing whatsoever. And that's a bit frustrating to me.
How widely is CNN Turk watched in Lebanon and Egypt and other countries?
In Egypt, probably yes, but in Lebanon, I doubt anyone watches yet. Like, the Lebanese are more into maybe the foreign language, like they would probably watch CNN English than CNN Turk.
Moving on on this issue, still within the confines of the media and the press coverage, from your opinion, both of you, if you can give a brief overview about how is the conflict represented? Is it an issue of, an existential issue? Is it an issue of territory? Is it an issue of religion? Is it an issue of territorial integrity versus right of self-determination? Is there a trend that you can basically say that this is the trend in the Arab press approaching the Artsakh conflict?
Vera, would you like to say something about the media?
Before this late conflict, before it recently erupted, the Turks and the Azeris tried always to let's say present the issue as a conflict, as a religious conflict between Muslim Azeris and Christian Armenians and we have always tried as Armenians in the diaspora, especially Armenians in the Middle East, to explain to our, let's say, people here, Arabs, our Arab friends, that this is not a conflict based on religion. We are not fighting each other because we are Christians and Azeris are Muslims, and we give really good arguments to show that this is not a religious conflict. Why? Because for example, on the political level, Iran, for example, as a neighbor to Armenia, tries to stay neutral in this conflict, and and by staying neutral to this conflict is actually supporting the Armenian side, while it's not supporting directly the Azerbaijani side, despite that the two countries come from the same, let's say, religious base. They are both Shia countries, but we've never seen Iran supporting Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is a Muslim country. So we try to give different arguments to show that really this is not a religious conflict. It's based on, it is an ethnic cleansing against the Armenians by Azerbaijanis. It is the issue of self-determination. So Armenians has to determine their future, their, I don't know, let's say their status.
Based on what Vera said, Katya, one of the questions we have would be interesting to dwell on a bit is what analogies, if any, are being put in place to explain what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh to the Arab public, in the Arab media. In the West, for instance, a lot of people talk about the Kosovo effect and so on and so forth. What drives home with the Arab public that the Arab press focuses on in explaining this?
They don't compare it to anything, not even the Palestinian cause. There's no comparison made. They only talk about, this being a Turkish war against the Armenians. And Vera said something that we try to explain to but I don't see that in the media. That's the problem. You open, like if anyone is Googling the news, they will not see anything. Just a week before the war started, on the independence of Armenia, for example, there were Arabic versions of Aliyev and I think the foreign minister saying, and all the titles were Armenia is a country that hates Islam. I never saw the refutation for that. I never saw any article where an Armenian, without bringing in the issue of Iran. Most of these Arab countries are now against Iran, so our being friends with Iran is not helping. That argument is not helping.
Right.
But there is no comparison. They just give the facts. Sometimes they do show, they do try to show both sides of the story. Yesterday, there was a very short interview on Al Jazeera, the Qatari one, and we know that Qatar is on Turkish side. And you would feel the person who was interviewing was trying to help the Armenian more than trying to help the Azeri. But we're weak in this sense. We are unable to present our case properly to the Arab world.
Asbet, can I add to this? Why we are unable to present our case to the Arabs? Because we lack the language. We lack people
who can write Arabic. Arabic is a difficult language. I can understand that. but we do have a lot of translators. These can be done in a group, in an office. And I don't know, when 2-3 people can sit together, a think tank, something where they can write it in English or Armenian, and then they can be translated. I don't think that's a good excuse.
Vera and Katya, I think that there is an issue when we're talking about the media or penetrating the Arab media. There's one aspect is the written aspect, which is easier to do with a couple of people in a group. But then there's obviously the interview aspect where you speak literally not only the language, but the lexicon as well. People who are able to talk with a political language or explain the issues. But one thing, Katya, that you mentioned earlier is that in the media, in the Arab media, they talk about this as an attack on Armenia. Is there a distinction being made, or at least explicitly being mentioned, that Turkey is also attacking Armenia, or there's always the argument that this is Turkey supporting Azerbaijan in its attack on Armenia?
Well, you have to keep in mind that the Arab world has nothing against Azerbaijan. They have, most of them have diplomatic missions back and forth. So it's not they don't have a problem with Azerbaijan itself. They have a problem with Turkey. And that's the one they are fueling. That's the one that they're using when they talk about the war in Karabakh, in Artsakh.
Is there enough in the Arab media from Armenian side that connects the narrative that this is not just an Armenian-Azerbaijani war, but it's actually an Armenian-Turkish war?
As I said, they are capitalizing on that problem with Turkey. And nowadays, there's a lot of talk about banning Turkish products. The Saudi prince telling his people to sell their homes if they bought, So they're fueling that. It's always the Turkish-Armenia conflict rather than Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict.
And in this context, within the context of the media, having an influence on the media, is there a targeted, at least on op-eds or is there a tradition of Armenians writing op-eds or pro-Armenian people writing op-eds to the news media, various news media? Or is that more common in the Western world? And how receptive are they for op-eds?
Well, we do have a couple of people. I can't remember the names, but one of them is in Kuwait, if I'm not mistaken. And they do write op-eds. With this current 24/7 media and all of the newspapers, they want people to write for them for free. And that's the thing that we're not utilizing and we're not taking advantage of. We're too quiet. We're too kind. We think that because, our cause is, right. Yeah, I mean, it's just so, God will help us. And that's it. I mean, we're not doing anything when it comes to propaganda.
Okay, when it comes to propaganda, let's move away a bit from the press, although press is obviously part of the propaganda, but let's look at another aspect of propaganda or work, let's say, and that is lobbying. In Arab countries, in many host Arab countries, what is the lobbying like? What shape does lobbying take in the Arab world? In the West, we have a basic understanding. In the United States, it takes a different shape. In Europe, it has yet another shape, and so on. But in the context of the Arab world, especially, let's say, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt even, what does it mean to lobby for policymakers or to talk and meet with local politicians about this issue?
Unfortunately, there is nothing as lobbying in the Arab world. We're not talking, when we talk about Arab worlds, we're not talking about democratic regimes where you have the freedom of speech and you can say anything. So lobbying is more a Western, let's say, tradition, which is not found in the Arab world, unfortunately. Even in Lebanon, we cannot talk about lobbying. We have good relations with some politicians, and even if you look at the recent conflict, we didn't have actually politicians who stood by our rights in Karabakh, our war in Karabakh. In Syria, you cannot talk about lobbying in Syria, and only lately, during the last few maybe months or the last 2 or 3 years, we Armenians of Syria were able to talk about the Armenian genocide openly, and especially after Syria recognized the Armenian genocide. So, but look at the media, Syrian media. They are not talking, they are not speaking or writing about the conflict. They are just writing as any kind of news, as any news item. But there was a very famous, let's say, a speech for Bashar Assad, who said that, for example, Turkey is bringing terrorists from Syria and Libya to fight in Azerbaijan, accusing Turkish presidents of being, for example, behind the escalation in Nagorno-Karabakh. He mentioned Nagorno-Karabakh, and he mentioned Turkey's role in Nagorno-Karabakh. But we didn't hear anything from, let's say, Egyptian politicians or Iraqi politicians, let's say. Even, as I said,
Right.
Lebanon, which is more democratic and which is more an open space for free speech, unfortunately, we didn't have this, let's say,
Right.
strong positions for Nagorno-Karabakh or the war in
Right.
Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yeah, Vera, you bring up a good point. I mean, lobbying in any other word, a rose in any other name is still a rose. So lobbying in any other name is still lobbying. And I think what you were mentioning in the Arab world, it's all about transaction. The lobbying concept is more transactional. You support someone, you cultivate good relations with them, and when you need
Yeah.
them, they can make a statement and or a statement here and statement there. So have those networks been utilized or not?
Not yet,
And
unfortunately.
beyond Lebanon, have there been cultivated? Are there networks that are cultivated that can be utilized, or we still do not have that cultivation
I
level?
think we don't have that cultivation still. I think we don't have it. Everything has to do.
I think the closest we can get to lobbying is what the Egyptian Armenians are doing. Not
How
about
so,
the war,
Katya?
not about the war, but it's more of, having all these back and forth trips, taking a minister to Armenia, bringing I don't know what to Egypt, developing tourism between Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, even after the explosions in Egypt, and tourism was at stake. It was the Armenians who started bringing back tourists and whatever. So that's probably the closest we can get to lobbying. And probably we need to understand the Arabic psyche. I mean, these people are so nice that they forget quickly. So they know that if they say something against Turkey, in 4 or 5 years, they will be hugging and kissing each other and forgiving each other.
Yeah, this is the tradition. Yeah,
That's my
unfortunately.
community here. Excuse me?
Katya, what you mentioned again is, it seems again transactional, isn't it? In terms of, you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of a situation,
Correct.
which
Yeah.
means also in this context. So it seems that at least in the case of Egypt, when it comes to the reaction or the predisposition that Egypt officially or at some level, public level, not a lot, we're talking about a population of 100 million or so, it's very much based on state-to-state relations, at least in the case of Egypt, the example that you gave. So do you feel that, and this question, I'll give the floor first to Vera, and Katya, you can also chime in. So does this mean that the best, quote unquote, that the Armenian communities in the Middle East can do is to cultivate the state-to-state relations by facilitating Armenia's sort of representatives coming in, cultural and touristic and so on and so forth? And is that a sustainable model to continue rather than looking for other alternatives?
So first, it's our duty, of course, as Armenian communities, to encourage, to promote the relations between Armenia and the Arab states in the Arab world. I mean, and it would be very good for Armenia to have these relations with different Arab countries. And it is easy, and this issue is very easy because we still have Armenian communities living in this region, so it's easier to to start a good relations on different levels, political, economic, and I don't know, cultural level with Armenia in Lebanon, let's say, between Lebanon and Armenia, between United Arab Emirates and Armenia. I'm not talking about Saudi Arabia, of course, because we don't have an Armenian community there, but Syrian relationship with a Syrian-Armenian relationship. And we have this, and I mean, we started this relationship, but they are not executed by the Armenian side, because always Armenia have looked at the Arabs as I don't know how to say it.
Let's call them foreign. Yeah, a different culture.
They don't look at Europe, for example, the same. They have always an eye on Europe. They expect something from Europe. They admire European principles. They admire European values. So they expect something from Europe. They think that Europeans can help them. While on the contrary, we have a big community here still living in the Arab world, and we can start good relationships with the Arabs, because Arabs are. Put aside the religious factor. It's easy to start a relationship with the Arabs.
Right.
In this case, I can give example for Armenia, for example, developing relations with the United Arab Emirates. And this is very important goal, and it should be a priority for Armenia to start a good relationship with the United Arab Emirates. And the United Arab Emirates, this time, or in this period of time, is eager to start a good relation with Armenia, because it thinks that Armenia is going to be a bridge for United Arab Emirates to have markets not only in Armenia but also in Russia. So it looks at Armenia as a bridge to reach Russia. So they have interest. They think they can have interest in the Caucasus, and Armenia is a very good friend to allow or to open them that space. This is one example.
Right.
But lately Saudi Arabia also had changed their position regarding Armenia. They, for example, on September 21, the Saudi Emir congratulated the Armenian president, for example, on the Independence Day of Armenia. So this has started newly, but it has also an important factor that plays this role, or helps this role: Turkey in the region. You see, Turkey in the region is an important factor to have all these positions changed, or pro-Armenia or anti-Armenia.
Right. So basically, in a nutshell, if you were, well, it's not a nutshell, but if we were to look at the Arab reaction, especially policy, governments, and so on, it is more motivated by their sort of policy in general vis-a-vis Turkey, or versus Turkish quote-unquote expansion in the region. I mean, in the case of Egypt, you have the issue of Libya and Turkey taking one side. In the case of Syria, it's quite obvious, and so on. So from that perspective, then, that is very, again, temporary. You know, it could easily flip on the other side. And if they want to get better relations with Turkey, then there won't be any effort or any quote unquote allies, Arab allies, in this context.
Can I add something to what Vera was saying? She dismissed Saudi Arabia. We don't have an embassy because we don't have a community. Yes, we do have a community. They might be 100 people, but many of them are in excellent positions. I don't know if you know, one of the, if not the largest, one of the largest construction companies, which is called Bin Laden Construction. In their board of directors, there are 2 Armenians, you know, and we hear about them a lot. We have to capitalize. You can't just dismiss Saudi Arabia because there is no community. It really doesn't matter.
Right.
I would have preferred, instead of opening an embassy in Israel, there should have been an opening of an embassy in Saudi Arabia, for example.
Right. Well, that would be a discussion and an analysis of the larger Armenian foreign policy discussion.
Yeah, I mean, since Saudi Arabia is now, anti-Turkey, they're coming up with all of these, maybe we should have been present there as well.
Well, Katya, because of the changing landscape in the Middle East these days, with many countries trying to establish relations, diplomatic or otherwise, with Israel, that might be not a binary issue. But I want to maybe move in a bit of a different direction. Obviously, both of you are based in Lebanon. Could you give us a sense? I'm going to go country by country, just briefly, both of you. if you can overall assess the situation in a couple of sentences. For instance, I'm going to go in several countries. So Egypt, we already started talking about. Could you give an assessment about the overall situation on this issue in Egypt? What is it that the Armenian community able to do or is capable of doing, and what are the potentials that the Armenian community in Egypt can do? Vera, you started talking about this. Maybe Katya, you can start, and then if there's anything, Vera can supplement.
In Egypt, recently, or a year ago, actually, the parliament was they put it on the agenda, I think it was for March 17, 18, around that time, to recognize the genocide. And I don't know why it was tabled. They never mentioned it again. I don't know if it was because of the COVID-19 or any other political issue that came up. So Egypt is, I think they're on the right track. There is a lot of communication between the Armenian community and many of the ministries. There's a lot of communication between the government of Egypt and the Armenian government. So I think they're on the right track.
Okay.
They're doing excellent for a community that's probably 4,000 only out of, as you said, 100 million.
Okay, Katya, about Egypt, point well taken. You know, it's not about just the size, as you also mentioned in the case of Saudi Arabia. It's about the impact. What about Jordan? Jordan seems to be a bit silent, or it's not on the radar.
Okay, my parents were from Jordan, so I have a lot of relatives in Jordan. Unfortunately, the Jordanian community is small and they keep to themselves. I remember 2-3 months ago, there was an article, an MP by a Jordanian MP, which was a bit against Armenians. And I shared it with one of the Jordan Armenian groups on Facebook, and I was told to remove it because this person is very influential. They don't want any problems because he can do things, through the government and close the club, let's say, down.
Right.
The Jordan has a special case. If you look at the news, you see ministers going back and forth between Jordan and Azerbaijan. I think there's a lot of investment. There's a lot of business going on between these two countries. And the Armenian community is a little bit afraid of, lobbying or whatever.
Vera, we listened to the case of Egypt, the Armenians in Egypt and in Jordan. In the case of Syria, Armenia actually was one of the very few countries that maintained a consulate in Aleppo during the civil war and had an embassy in Damascus who had an ambassador who was actually very fluent in Syrian. So state-to-state relations seem to be developed at a very good pace or at a very good standard. Now, the question is, other than the fact that Syria is against Turkey in the current civil war, are there any possible political capitals that could be accumulated, and how can that be used in general, specifically in this conflict, especially considering that there are reports that many mercenaries were actually hired by Turkey from Syria to be sent to Artsakh?
The Arab states regarding the issue in Nagorno-Karabakh, the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, we can say one thing. Since now all the let's say most of the Arab states have problems, or they are anti-Turkey today, and they are really angry from the expansionist desires of Turkey in the region. But I don't think that these relations would be cut off one day. They always leave an open door to regain or to restart these relations with Turkey. For example, today there is a talk about, let's say, secret meetings between Syria and Turkish officials regarding some issues have to do with the Kurdish problem, with the future, let's say, starting a future relationship. So even if there is today a stand, let's say, or a position against Turkey, and this has its influence over Nagorno-Karabakh, there will be always an open door to restart this relationship and forget all about Nagorno. We didn't hear, for example, any stands from Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates regarding the issue or the war going in Karabakh. Or even we didn't listen or we didn't hear any political, let's say, stand from Lebanon, which is the most, let's say, open and democratic state where everybody can say everything. So this is a political issue. And as I said, these countries, even Egypt started a resolution in the parliament to recognize the Armenian genocide, but they suddenly they pulled it off. So because why? Because they always have in mind that someday the relationship between Turkey and Egypt will go back to its normal. So they cannot just throw out the idea of cutting off the relationship with Turkey for good. That's why we cannot count on these countries, on their positions regarding the Nagorno-Karabakh. Tomorrow might change. This position, if today is pro-Karabakh, tomorrow will be anti-Karabakh. We cannot count on their positions for good.
One of the things is that, so it's not only transactional, but it's also temporal. It's about convergence of interests and the timing and so on.
Isn't it the same with Europe? Those countries who recognized the genocide, how come Turkey forgot about it? Why can't we tell the Arabs, look at France, despite all the problems between them, there's a lot of investment going on between these two countries. They have diplomatic missions left, right, and center. I mean, why should we say the Arabs don't do it and we don't take action? This inaction, I call it inaction. We're always trying to find excuses why we're not doing enough. I mean, look at the United States. Look at all these countries.
Point well taken. I mean, what you're saying is about having double standards or double expectations, different expectations from different countries within that context. Now, one of the things that we didn't talk about, and to what extent it is important, to some extent it is important, but what about Iraq? Do you guys have any sense as to what is the Iraqi policymakers or the media is talking about, especially considering that they have a sizable Turkoman population, and they also have been reports that some of them were recruited to go to Artsakh by Turkish forces and so on. Do you guys have anything to add about the Iraqi sort of scene?
There's also a huge Kurdish community, and they do have a lot of media in the Arabic language that are printing articles or reports about the war, or even on the genocide and relations with Armenia, etc. It's not that they're quiet completely.
Right.
From the government side, I don't know, but you do see Iraq news, Iraq press, Iraq whatever. They do have, if you scan through the Arabic Google, you will see them as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I actually myself witnessed a couple of Kurdish sort of news media interviewing people in Armenia, and thanks to the active Yazidi community, sort of Yazidi Armenian citizens, who actually have been advocating in those media about this, the Kurdish media. But overall, in terms of policy, have you been reading or seeing anything on a policy level and on a government level?
Personally, I haven't seen on the political level, but I know few intellectuals who visited Artsakh last year, and they came back and wrote some articles about the Armenians and the Armenian genocide and the Artsakh conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But few intellectuals, not on the political level. And I want to add on Katya's what she said about the Kurdish media. I was interviewed many times by the Kurdish TV channels. One was located in Syria and in Qamishli actually, and the other one is in Lebanon. But they were Kurdish channels, and they were really as if adopting our cause and talking about Artsakh as if it was one of their issues, one of their causes. So they were very, very, yes, very pro-Artsakh. The news they were actually broadcasting was pro-Artsakh. Yeah, and they used the word Artsakh even. They didn't. They never used the word Nagorno-Karabakh. They always used for example, the Artsakh, and they say this is the Armenian word of Karabakh.
I want to go back quickly to Katya and ask you, Katya, about the Gulf, Arab Gulf countries, the Persian Gulf, Arab Gulf countries. You did mention the Emirati and the Qataris, which actually have dominated the media, or they have a dominant pan-Arab media. Any other countries like Bahrain or Oman or any other country that you see any kind of an interest in the media on this issue?
No, actually, from Oman, you only see congratulations on Independence Day. The same from Bahrain.
Yeah.
But I've seen a few from North Africa, Algeria and Morocco, and I think they borrow again material from the Egyptian press.
Well, this raises a question. Perhaps it's more of a research question, but in this context, when you look at the press media versus the audio-video media, especially Al Arabiya or Al Jazeera and so on, I'm guessing then, is it correct to assume that the Egyptian media, press media, is the more dominant one in the Arab world? Does it set the tone? Or you feel that there are other countries or other newspapers or other press in other countries that actually are as dominant?
Not really.
The written press is coming out of Egypt, definitely. The TV is more from the Arab Gulf. Most of these cable news are located in the Arab Gulf. You have Al Arabiya in the Emirates.
Right.
You have even Sky News, the Arabic version, they are there. We have Al Mayadeen, which is all over the Middle East. Al Jazeera is Qatari, and it's quite interesting when you look at Al Jazeera Arabic. It's a bit different than Al Jazeera English. Al Jazeera English is more neutral. Al Jazeera Arabic is more pro Azerbaijan. So
Yeah.
as I said, the written one is coming out of Egypt definitely, but the visual, the videos are more from the Arab Gulf. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would like to wrap this up, but also it's very important to talk about Vera, since you're the executive director of the ANC Middle East. I was wondering if you can tell us in a couple of sentences also the challenge that you are facing now, other than these that we talked about, in terms of getting this as part of the larger Armenian National Committee's sort of agenda, but it has become it has been put on the front burner. What are some of the key sort of challenges and opportunities that you've been trying to coordinate in terms of as the office of the ANC Middle East?
Since our goal as an ANC Middle East is to create a public opinion that would support our cause in general, and we face and we're still facing many challenges in the Arab world. The most important challenge, as I said, and I will continue saying, is the religious factor, which is very difficult to overcome in the Arab world. This is what, and I will also again emphasize this idea that Turkey is trying to play on this, let's say, word on religion to gain the support of the Arab world, and it's still continuing, and it will do the same after some issues are settled in the Arab world. You will see tomorrow that Syria, Libya, and Egypt will start their restart their relationship with Turkey. So our aim is to create this public opinion that would help or support the Armenian case, the Armenian genocide, the Karabakh issue, and this faces, as I said, many challenges. We don't have something called lobbying, which is a very difficult thing to do, because we have some committees like on the political level that do this job. They talk to politicians. It's not. This is different than what the Armenian lobby or the Armenian ANC in America is doing, and the Armenian ANC in Europe is doing, because the concept of parliaments in the Arab world is not the same as the concept of parliaments in the West. So we don't work on parliaments, unfortunately. We work on intellectuals, universities, let's say media sector. We have good relationship with the media sector everywhere in the Arab world. I personally have good relations with the media in Egypt through, of course, our friends of the ANC chapters in the Arab region. We have good relations with the media sector or with media in general in Dubai. For example, the Sky News call us, the Sky News Arabic, BBC Arabic, Al Jazeera. Even we don't have good relations with Al Jazeera, but still they call us for information. We organize conferences. We publish books in Arabic only. We don't publish books in foreign languages. We publish only Arabic because, unfortunately, the Arab people, the Muslims in general in the Arab world, don't read except when on the intellectual level. Even there, they don't read foreign language today. They read only Arabic. So it's our duty to present to them our views and ideas in Arabic.
Okay. And one final question, Katya, to you. How would you assess the impact of the media on the masses, on the larger public? Like when we talk about the print media versus the audio media, in the past, things have devolved, maybe not a lot of people follow, but is the press media still influential in shaping the so-called Arab street or the masses or the public?
As Vera said, the Arabs are not readers that much. The readers are usually in Iraq. They are good readers. And it seems the Egyptians are, yes. They would probably prefer videos.
Too many challenges and quite too many questions and quite too many issues to explore. This is Aspet Kochikian, and I was talking today with my guests, Katya Peltakian and Vera Yakubian, on the situation of the reaction of the Arab world, media and policy-wise, on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Thank you both very much for your time, and I hope to have a chance to have you again on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes this conversation on Groong episode. As always, we hope it helped improve your understanding of the issues involved and look forward to your feedback, including your suggestions for conversation topics in the future. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's Groong, or on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or on our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm 𝐀𝐬𝐿𝐿, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening and talk to you soon.